The regular season is heating up, new stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half and the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Serie A Chronicles is a M.I.A Chronicles production.
It is another week, so therefore it is time for another episode of the Serie A Chronicles with me, Patrick Kendrick, alongside Nikki Bandini and M.I.A Rizuki. We're very excited about breaking down another weekend of Serie A action. And as ever, we will have our weekly bonus pod as well. We're going to be discussing the first team of the capital, Lazio, against German giants, FC Bayern München. But that's all to come. First of all, Nikki, M.I.A, how are you getting on?
Good, yeah. I've just about recovered sleep. I did stay up and watch the Super Bowl on Sunday night, as
Me
a lot
too.
of listeners already know. What did you? I used to cover it. In fact, I covered it even last year, so it's not a rare year for me not covering it. So watching it from England was different.
Who were you cheering? Sorry, I didn't see that.
Well, I didn't tweet about it really until the end of the game. I was just enjoying it in my own company, which was quite nice actually, as a change from being there. Oddly, I quite enjoyed just sitting there and just enjoying it. But it was... I enjoy being a neutral for games like that and getting to just not worry too much. But I did live in Missouri for 2 years, didn't I? So I've got friends in Missouri and Kansas City.
Oh, God. So you're going from a
Missouri
home?
and Kansas.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Straddles two states. There's like Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah,
I was devastated. Devastated at the 49ers. I mean, I full on started crying. No, I was so upset. But it was a great game. It was one of the best Super Bowls I think I really, really enjoyed it because it was so on a knife edge the whole time. And I just thought everyone had talked about, Kansas City's defense and the 49ers offense. And I was like, no, their defense is really good. Their defense is really good. And I was so impressed. But McCaffrey, oh my God, him and Miss Universe. I was so done with Taylor Swift, I loved Olivia Culpo and McCaffrey. And it was just the 49ers, man. I really, really fell for them. So never mind. But
just quickly on the Swift Kelsey thing, because I feel like I've had this thought and don't think enough people have gone with me. Like, this is America's Posh and Becks, right? Like, you couldn't have.
I was going to say Shakira and PK, no?
Shakira and PK. That's such a low level Posh and Becks.
How rude. I love Shakira.
She's much bigger as a star, but PK is not Becks. I don't know.
PK. Yeah, love PK.
But Nikki, yes, I agree with you. This is Posh and Becks. This is the American version when he's like, "Oh, yeehaw," and she's like, "Oh my God."
he's so perfectly American in a way that David Beckham was so perfectly English.
Yeah.
And they're like the right fame profile. You're talking about someone who, Kelsey probably isn't the best ever at his position, but he's one of the best ever at his position. And she's obviously
definitely the best, one of the best ever.
Internationally iconic, huge superstar. So I feel like not enough people have made that comparison for me. So I wanted to say it here on our very important podcast.
Although I am more of a fan of Alessandro Matri and Federica Nargi, but that's for another
I like them.
Yeah,
I like them all the time, and I'm always wondering when they do when they do these interviews with Diletta, and I'm like, aren't you scared that like Matri is going to look her way? Like I would be a little bit like, Like, even though I'm Federica, like, imagine, there's still that part of me that's like, it's Diletta, right? Like, she's hot. Anyway.
Right, before we get into all of the chat about the actual football, let me just give you all a reminder that you can sign up to our Chronicles Tifosi membership on Patreon with a 7-day free trial and listen to every available podcast episode in your free trial period in full and 100% ad-free. And then you can decide whether you want to stay on as part of our Chronicles Tifosi community. Also, make sure you do join the community chat in the Patreon app. And why not give us a 5-star rating? Because Mina will threaten you otherwise. Yes. And a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you're listening. It helps us to be found. So, as I mentioned, we will be doing a deep dive later on this week, talking about the Champions League. But first and foremost, we need to get into... This was a weekend with two massive games on paper, and one of them delivered more than the other one, Roma, Inter, and then we had Milan, Napoli, and also a significant game involving Juventus, Mina. But we're going to get onto that because Juventus's importance in the title race is diminishing by the week. So therefore, we can't lead with them. We have to lead with one place. Daniele De Rossi, who at half-time was on course for 4 straight wins until it all came crumbling down in the second half. Inter again flexing their muscle. I'm not sure what the story is here, whether it's Inter and their resilience as well as their ruthlessness, or whether Roma have shown again enough positives to prove that they can be a force going forward. Mina, which is it? Were you more Camp Roma or Team Inter this weekend?
To be honest with you, this is one of the few games.
Juventina, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. This is one of the few games in which, like sometimes a lot of times you watch something and you're like, well, it is because this team's really crap, right? Like it was like when I'm talking about Lazio and Cagliari, I'm like, well, it is Cagliari. And I was speaking over the weekend about, anyway, never mind. I don't know what I'm getting on here. I'm saying this is a bit of both. I was really expecting Daniele De Rossi's Roma to be gobshite, if that's even a word that I'm allowed to use. I don't know why I expected that, even though they had 3 wins in my head. I'm like, they're going to be overestimating their... I thought, you're definitely going to be overestimating your talent at this point, and you're up against Inter, you're going to leave all these defensive gaps, and this is Inter, right? And then they really went for it, and started to actually create all these difficulties for Inter side. And I was really, honestly, I was so shocked. And it's made me view them entirely differently, to be honest with you. They actually are that good. They haven't overestimated themselves. They were absolutely brilliant in the first half. And what they've learned is that you can't really sit back against Inter. You have to go for them and you have to try to attack them. And they don't like it when you do go for them. We've seen that with Sassuolo. We've seen that with, for example, Real Sociedad in the Champions League. It's constant suffocation. It's taking risks going forward. And I love that Daniele De Rossi's Roma is doing that. It's a very dynamic team. And I'm going to honestly say that had they had an actual striker that's not Lukaku, then maybe they would have been up there as well, But it was actually their 2 stars in Lukaku and Dybala who didn't perform for them. Inter are always going to be resilient. Inter were always going to check back and find their way to do that. But I still feel that this is the problem that we have with Roma, is that they can't hold on for the full 90 minutes. We saw that in the first 2 games when sometimes they tire out and they start clinging on, just to secure the win in those 2-1 victories. And it was a bit exhausting the way they play. So they've got to find their right rhythm, because right now it's a bit too much going forward. But both impressive for me.
Yeah, De Rossi, Nicky, said after the game, I think, that was the mistake that Roma made, wasn't it? As soon as they went 2-1 up, they then started to be caught in 2 minds. Can we now protect this lead? And that almost worked against them, whereas in the first half, they had been so bold and refreshingly so compared with what we saw before. Sorry to bring him up against Jose Mourinho, the predecessor. It's like night and day, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you were asking me, which the story is. And for me, the story has to be De Rossi. It just does. And I think, one of those things that you get asked a lot when you cover football is, who do you support? And I really mean it when I tell people, when you cover a sport for a long time and a league for a long time, what you end up rooting for more than a team or anything is storylines. And it's just so impossible not to root for Daniele De Rossi, who grew up in Rome, who is a Roman, who was in that academy, who was Capitan Futuro, who was then the captain, when he's standing in ridiculous suit jacket in torrential downpour, soaked through to his skin, and he's got that big beard and he's just roaring and they're winning 2-1 against Inter. It's a story that you sort of want to believe in, and he's made this team believe in itself, I think, in ways that it didn't under Mourinho. And who could be surprised? Because Mourinho was constantly tearing someone out, was constantly knocking people down and saying, well, we're not good enough to do this, we're not good enough to do that. And De Rossi has taken this completely opposite tack where he said, from day one, actually, even when they were talking to him, he was interviewed right after he got the job about, oh, why didn't you ask for there to be an option in your contract to extend if you go well? And he said, we don't need parachutes here. We've got good players, got a good opportunity. We don't need fallbacks. We're going to go and be good because we can be good. And he's continued that narrative. He said before this game, any team can lose, Inter can lose. And they approached that half like they believed it. I mean, Stefan El-Shaarawy getting Sommer to tip the ball over his crossbar in the first minute of the game, coming back from a goal down, and a goal which you could have easily turned into a negative narrative in your head because there was some controversy about players in offside positions, rebounding from that. And I think that all of that is what I feel most strongly about this game, is that he's brought back a completely different energy to this team. I think that what you saw in the second half is he hasn't resolved all of the issues with his team, and that he's got some tactical, maybe even some tactical naivety in his team as well, because the second goal in particular, Barella and then Pavard have so much space, it's absurd. They have as much time as they want to do whatever they want. So it's not a balanced team right now. And I think you can also talk about individuals, talk about Angelino, who's coming from Galatasaray, scored the own goal, but he actually on that second goal, he was a headless chicken. He was completely lost on that as well. So
after an encouraging debut against Cagliari, but obviously that shows the levels, doesn't it?
Exactly. So for me, De Rossi is the narrative, and I think you don't come away from this with a complete answer about whether or not he's going to resolve everything. But I think it was a far more competitive performance than I expected from his team against Inter. I think, as Mina touched on, if Lukaku takes his chance at 3-2, this could still very easily end as a draw. And I think that, again, everything he said at the end to me felt right. He said his whole bit about, look, Luciano Spalletti always said, you can't accept compliments after defeat. I'm a son of Spalletti because that's how you become mediocre. So that was a very De Rossi thing to say, I thought. But he also said, look, Inter didn't steal anything. I also think a draw would have been a reasonable result. And I agree with all of that. I think Inter didn't steal anything. They were the better team. But if it had finished as a draw, you wouldn't have turned around going, well, they didn't deserve that either.
And the other side of the coin is Inter, in the sense that, again, we saw this same subplot. Essentially, it seems it's a little bit reductive, but it boils down to Inter replaced Lukaku with Marcus Thuram. He scored the winner in the reverse fixture. He scored a goal here. He basically scored a second, albeit it was eventually given as an own goal to Angelino. And how much of an upgrade is he on? Mina, I know you don't need much encouragement to talk badly about Lukaku, but I mean, it does show, doesn't it, that Inter is almost a lucky escape for Inter in some ways, because they wanted to bring Lukaku back, and then he was flirting left, right and centre, and eventually they were the jilted lovers, and they've gone from strength to strength. I mean, Inter just winning every single game. Sure, I mean, we've said it for a couple of weeks now, but it feels, especially as we'll touch on Juventus in due course, it feels like the title is now theirs.
Oh, I think the title's very much theirs. But I think that it's also important because Inzaghi wasn't available for the first half. And apparently he was screaming on the phone, ranting and raving about pushing the fullbacks further forward and trying to make the tactical changes required that saw this strong Inter afterwards. And what I think is incredible is that Inter don't need to be amazing for 90 minutes. They're good enough to be amazing for only a certain number of minutes and win. And that is very much sort of the emblem of what Juventus were during that 9-year win. And Inter is just perfecting that. And they have the players capable of it. So they can face all the problems they can face, but they know how to find the solutions. And I think that's what's so impressive. But Marcus Thuram, it's interesting because he was talking about, you know, how he is a striker and what he looks for and how he tries to improve because he watches so much football. But it's also the fact that, you know, there's been conversations with his father nightly about his father's role as a defender and how he can expose defenders or just put them in a position in which they're scared. And what ends up happening is he's provoked 2 own goals in back-to-back games. And I think that's, you know, we can talk about the fact that Gatti and Angelino aren't exactly the world's greatest defenders, but it's incredible how much of a mess he puts them in that they end up scoring the goal because they're so scared of him. And I think that has
lots of penalties as well this season as well.
Precisely that. He knows exactly how to make himself enough of a nuisance when he can't score a goal to annoy the defender into and create the situation where there's an own goal. or a foul or a penalty given away. And I think that has a lot to do with the intellect that he plays with. He is a very intelligent player who's come up in a lot of the big games and made a difference. He is the perfect companion to Lautaro Martinez. And Lautaro Martinez has also brought out the best in him, because you see how much Thuram is so much better alongside him. Obviously, other than the fact that this is a brilliant midfield, but in the second half, it was like clear that something had gone wrong, that we are now going to get back into knowing that we are into and we can win this. And it doesn't require much, to be honest with you. But in the first half, I was also quite surprised by Pavard. I was like, where were you in the derby? You were like the man, and now you're just losing people. But I also just... I also want to go back to the fact that, when we're talking about De Rossi and all the wonderful things he said, did you not find it very interesting that once upon a time, Mourinho thought the referees were against him? There's this controversial goal. Is it offside? Is it not? VAR calls it back. And there's De Rossi being like, no, this is absolutely a goal. Friedkins, I got you. I'm going to be a really happy-go-lucky guy who doesn't think the refs are against us.
Isn't he? I think he realises the best PR is to be the complete opposite of Mourinho. I think there's a little bit of playing into that as well, I think, absolutely. Now, I just want to say that I completely agree with Mina on this, and I completely agree with you as well. I think part of it is just thinking we're changing the tone here, and we stick with that. So you say, for my idea of football, that's a goal. The rule is written in an ambiguous way, which it is. And in terms of the decision, I can completely understand the logic why it is a goal, because Patricio is free to move to the side of the goal where the ball goes, even though Thuram is on his shoulder on the other side. I struggle with it because there are 3 players in offside positions, and one of them is right next to the goalkeeper. And I think to say that that's not interfering with play in some way, to me is difficult conceptually. But I think that if that's how you're applying it, and De Rossi's whole point, which he sort of dropped in there, was, I think it's a goal, but you do see these things applied differerly. And that's forever the problem with the offside rule. You do see these things applied differently at different times. But I just think he's being really smart. And I think I honed in myself on the sideline and the image and the vision of De Rossi, which is, I think, really powerful, because I do think that part of being a successful football manager is vibes. But I do think that another part of it that we also shouldn't miss is that he's being smart. He's doing things that are intelligent. He's brought El Shaarawy into that team because he wanted a runner. He wanted someone who'd be direct, and El Shaarawy was the best of the attackers in this game, as you already touched on, Mina. He's also, I think, reviving Paredes in a way that I didn't expect. Paredes was really good in this game, I thought. And I haven't had many great things to think about Paredes before De Rossi came in at Roma. So I think he's...
Pellegrini, 6 goals in 4 games.
Actually showing some drops.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is...
I know, right? Like, it's Pellegrini's role, because what I found so irritating with Mourinho, and what he honestly always used to say as well in his press conferences, is how much and how important Dybala was to the team. It was very much like, no Dybala, no party, right? So relying entirely on this one boy to create everything for you on a creative level and make sure that he sews up all the departments was weird when you have people like El Shaarawy, when he is a direct runner, when you have the creativity of Pellegrini, who has really shone, and just also on a tactical level, his positioning. I think the way that he's been used is so excellent, and really, this is the Pellegrini that I always wanted for my team. Like, Pellegrini was the one player that I always wanted from Roma. Like, they gave us Pjanic, but once upon a time I dreamt of Pellegrini. And I do feel like I'm glad that that's finally being exploited. So it just offers you something else, where when there is a game where Dybala isn't at his best, like we saw against Inter. Nikki, isn't it you that used to come at me when I used to say he doesn't really show up in these big matches?
I just wait to send you snarky texts whenever he does show up in a big game. That's my whole thing.
I swear to you, it's like she's there at every single big game being like, look, Dybala showed up.
Always got to keep receipts. Right. I'm conscious of time. I think we're going to have lots of deep dives over the course of the coming months, waxing lyrical about Inter and the way they've swept all before them. And I also think we're going to consider what the future looks like with Roma under De Rossi, if he's able to stay on beyond next season. But this game had a massive impact on the title race. And it does feel to me like that Milik sending off against Empoli now is the sliding doors moment of the Scudetto race. Milik doesn't get sent off after a dozen minutes with the scoreline goalless between Juventus and Empoli. Juventus probably go on and beat Empoli. Inter start behind Juventus in the title race when they have to go away to Florence. Instead, Juventus draw playing with 10 men. Inter win in Florence. Inter then win the Derby d'Italia. Inter then win again away at Roma. And Juventus have now taken 1 point from a possible 9 after they were beaten at home by Udinese last night. We're recording this on Tuesday, Monday night. And wouldn't you know it, Lautaro scores the winner to end Juventus' title bid. Lautaro Giannetti, who I've never heard of. Oh, sorry, Nicky, sorry. Astonishing. I mean, Mina, I've got to start with you here. Juventus, I have to say, I didn't see much football this weekend because I had my sister and her 2 kids staying, which was lovely. So I did a couple of games Friday night and then Saturday, and then I was free to spend time with them. So I'm very much the layman presenter this time around. Over to you guys. Talk to me everything we need to know about the Juventus game. Underwhelming, I hear.
I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, when you start to when you go with Chiesa and Milik up front, there was a deep disconnect. This was a team that we thought had turned a corner in the sense that they started off the season by scoring 1 goal and holding on and showing us, their ability to suffer through it and to ensure the win, despite how poor the game could be. Then obviously we thought they turned the corner when Yildiz was now introduced. There started to be a lot of goals. They were thrashing teams in the Coppa Italia, and that started to also show up in Serie A. They started to score more and more goals. I know this because I do a betting show, and in the start of the season, my bet was always Juventus in under 3, and now it started to be Juventus in over 1.5. So it's just little things that you start noticing with how Juve had changed. And Yildiz had brought out the best in Vlahovic, who had a ridiculously brilliant January. And we talked about this a lot when we were going over sort of the Derby d'Italias and the winning mentality that it takes. And I do feel that this is what you get with kids is that you have these brilliant performances, but that ability to power through when you start to feel like your chance is gone, that resilience, if you like, is a difference maker. There was a part in the World Cup. I don't remember which World Cup it was. It wasn't the last one. I think it was in Russia, and it was Uruguay was about to go out, and it was Jimenez at the back who plays for Atletico Madrid started crying on the 80th minute, and Neville just he was just destroyed by the commentators. And I actually agreed with the destroying of the player, because you still had 10 minutes. It could be a cross, it could be an own goal, it could be a penalty. It was all possible. But it was the fact. Exactly. But it was the fact of the matter is he lost hope. And this was the difference between these teams that never lose hope, like Real Madrid, who score 3 goals in stoppage time to defeat Manchester City or PSG or whoever it is. Or it's right now Juventus, who basically did a Napoli. They sat in the hotel room, saw that they beat Roma. Feel like
Juventus did a Napoli. I never thought I'd hear you say that.
It seems like that.
Napoli's loser mentality.
It is.
Wow.
But you know what? It's fair to say that they showed up on that pitch without any desire and hunger. And there was moments from Rabiot had a moment, Bremer had a moment, but it just seemed like this was a side resigned to let's see. And even when Chiesa is running, and it seems to me like he's just a yapping, barking dog that's not really actually making the difference, but looking like he wants to. He has a lot of talent, but there's a lot that I don't get with Chiesa. I don't get why is he so far wide? What is going on? Is this what he's being told to do, or is he choosing to do all of this? Milik, there's no power through the middle. We needed Rabiot to make the right runs into the middle, which wasn't happening at this point, because you've got your star attacker hugging the side, can't even take any set piece. What is going on? You couldn't deliver a corner. This is the kind of stuff where are the basics of all of this? And it was a game that we really needed Vlahovic and Yildiz. And the fact is that we had to start with Milik and Chiesa. And I think that's...
Nicky, there's a footnote to that, isn't there? Vlahovic was injured, wasn't he? Yeah.
Vlahovic was injured. And you can't keep benching Chiesa, right?
Yeah, Chiesa is for sure getting to the point of, is this a problem for Juventus? It's becoming somewhere between a mystery of what happened to this guy's talent and also a burden, because you're never going to stop people from talking about him. You're never going to stop people from asking what's happened to his career, why he isn't delivering at the level we thought he was going to deliver at a Euro 2020. After Euro 2020, when he was so impressive for Italy. Mina and I have talked about this a few times. I feel like down the years that sometimes we wonder if he's almost better as an impact substitute than he is as a starter. And I think that question still hasn't really been resolved for me. But he hasn't played particularly well when he has started for Juventus this season. I do think when we talk about the defeat, sometimes it's easy to sort of build these big narratives about defeats, and sometimes the reality is, well, Juventus was still the better team in this game. Perhaps if you had Vlahovic on the pitch, he sticks the ball in the net and you get a different outcome, right? And that stuff is sort of the mundanity of football, I suppose. Like it's not always as complicated as we want it to be. Milik did stick the ball in the net, in fact, but it was disallowed because the ball had gone out of play.
Chiesa can't take a corner.
Yeah, Chiesa can't take a corner. I think it's difficult, isn't it? Clearly, losing that game against Inter is going to puncture your self-esteem. Clearly, the slip against Empoli is going to puncture your self-esteem. And I think there was perhaps a little bit of, on top of that, when you come off a game like the one against Inter, it's not just about feeling deflated that Inter are pulling ahead of you. It's about taking an opponent lightly. Udinese had won 2 games all season, and perhaps there wasn't just the same tension for Juventus as there had been. And I think you said it, Patrick, I couldn't quite hear you clearly, but it is with Juventus, you sort of expect the fino alla fine. And that's kind of the only reason that Juventus were in this title race to begin with, in my opinion. Juventus
Verona, Monza, there were lots of late wins. Salernitana.
It's forcing the issue. They force the issue and they usually find a way. I mean, it's never been stunning football. It's never been, but they forced the issue. And when they did it through Milik, I thought, well, they did it again. There's this ability to force the issue. And I thought, one more, it will happen. But this is where I didn't see Juventus show up anymore. There was something, and I could see that in the way that McKennie was playing in Rabiot, because I think they're 2 players who really are perfect for trying to force the issue. And I didn't necessarily see that from them. I only saw it in certain moments, less from McKennie, more from Rabiot. And this was a game that Kostic wasn't playing. This is a game that I thought for sure.
Taking off the burden, the shackles are gone.
Like this should be excellent, but it is. I mean,
but Mina, as devil's advocate, now, is there not an argument to say that yes, Juventus won with a last-minute goal at Monza, Juventus beat Verona with a last-minute goal, they won with a last-minute goal away at Salernitana? Is this not just that sequence catching up with them, that you can't always do it, and sometimes you get the breaks and sometimes it goes against you? And we've said it all season long, Inter's expected goals mean that they can win games. They can see 2 at Roma, but they're able to score 4 to go on and win the game. Juventus, if they're not keeping a clean sheet, they find it that much harder to win games, apart from that very small period when we saw them banging the goals in January.
No, Patrick, I can't lie. It's a perfect point that you make.
Yes.
Is this just
Clip that up, please, producer Simon. I think we should just have that pinned to the Serie A Chronicles Twitter account.
All right, don't get cocky.
Head to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership with a free 7-day trial. Get early access to every full-length episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, all episodes are 100% ad-free. And you get bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes, video episodes, and behind-the-scenes extras. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers.
Sports Social Podcast Network.